All right, so let's share screen and get into the lesson for today. So what I'm going to look at today comes from Unit 2, Response Writing in the 4th edition or Directed Writing Part 1 in the 5th edition, okay? What I mean by that is, in the exam paper, you're going to get exercises that test your ability to write things in a different style. So response writing or directed writing is all about, or also known as, reworking a given text into a different style, using your own words, okay? So the whole idea is to use your own words, but rework the ideas to show that you know what the content of the text contains. Now, depending on what edition of the book you have, this will either come from page 10 or 11, right? And this is the key point that wants to focus on this idea of directed writing or different styles. Now, some of you may have seen this from a previous lesson that we did on language and style. So don't worry, this is just a recap. And we might touch on some of those ideas because the whole point is directed writing is focused on language and style. So let's have a look at this. Key point. Directed writing or response to reading tasks. I'm just going to bring up my little pen here to be able to comment. Sorry, give me a moment. Okay, here we go. Right, so directed writing or response to reading tasks. So you'll notice that this falls under the category of paper 2 extended reading and paper 3 directed writing. Okay, both of these tasks are those which ask you to use material in a text in a specified way, right? In a specific style. You will be given instructions about the cap, that is the content. Okay, so you'll probably be given a passage that you have to read that you're going to base your written extract on, content, the audience, who you're writing for, and the purpose of your text, okay? What its aims are. They usually require modification of structure and style, so the format, okay, and the style, the way that you write. Maybe it'll be more colloquial, more informal, for example, than being formal. So they usually require modification of the structure and style of the original passage. So you need to change vocabulary, testing to see if you have a wide range of vocabulary. You need to change sentence structures. Maybe you'll make sentences more emotional. Maybe they'll be shorter and punchier. Okay? And text structure. So maybe you're going to change a newspaper article into a blog, or you're going to change a newspaper article into a letter, for example. Rather than simply listing points from the passage in the same order and using the same words, which doesn't really show your marker that you're capable of doing anything in particular other than copying material. Okay, so you want to avoid doing that. Everything has to be in your own words. Okay. So today I'm going to look at different styles of text. And this is all in your textbook, so don't worry, you can find it in there. For example, this is from the first part of Unit 2, an article called The Big Chill. And it says, read the following passage, which is a newspaper review. A newspaper review. So it's not just a newspaper article, it's a review of a non-fiction book. Okay, a non-fiction book, that means it's based on facts, okay, events that have happened, about a historical Arctic tragedy. All right, so you're given quite a bit of information here. Now, it's a review, it's a book review ultimately, the non-fiction book review. So it won't be your typical newspaper article that is giving you facts about an incident that has happened. It's going to look at what somebody has written and it's going to make some sort of judgment about that. So if you look closely at the start of this newspaper review, it always has the headline, okay? So if you had to write a newspaper review, you're going to make sure that you include the headline. The Big Chill is what it's called. And this will possibly relate to the title of whatever book is being reviewed, because it is a book review. So perhaps the title of the book is this, The Big Chill, is what I'm getting to. But let's have a look at how this review starts off in the newspaper. It says, Arctic explorers are a breed apart, inevitably drawn, it would seem, by tragedy and the poetry of a good end. Okay, trying to romanticize this idea of people dying for a cause. Consider Shackleton, famous explorer. Having narrowly survived the loss of his ship, the Endurance, when it was crushed by ice in the Weddell Sea, he later died aboard the Quest, another Antarctic no-hoper in 1922. So in other words, these explorers are willing to go where no other people would go, and despite the risks. Scott, of course, perished 10 years earlier, just a few miles from his base camp, having failed by a whisker to be the first to reach the South Pole. Okay, so this is another explorer, Robert Scott, wanting to be the first to reach the South Pole, and he died on that excursion. Amundsen, who beat his rival by just a couple of days, went on to die in an Arctic air crash. Okay, so Amundsen was actually the first person to get to the South Pole, and then he goes on to die in an Arctic air crash. I think he's doing that. I'll wait to see if you have any points coming through. Okay, if you don't, I'll just continue for now, and we'll come back to this question. Okay, so this is the introduction to the article, and here we've got a nice point here. Thank you for contributing. You're saying a newspaper is based on facts. Good. So yes, a newspaper article will contain facts. Excellent. Yes. And another comment, to give us an introduction about what's going on. Absolutely. What's going on where? In the article? In the article itself? I almost want to say the Arctic. In the article itself? So to give us an introduction about what's going on where? Okay, and it's not just about being in the Antarctic or the Arctic. It's beyond, it's something else. In the article itself, yes, but beyond that, you're right, in the article itself, yes, but beyond that, what else? What is this article's, what is its purpose? What is it trying to do? Good, okay, so it is a book that goes about what happened in the story. Good, okay, so you're saying it's looking at what the book entails, right? Good, it's touching on what the book is going to explore. It's giving us a taster, it's teasing us as readers. Why would a journalist do this? Why does the journalist want to give us tasters or teasers about this book? It's intriguing, yes, it's intriguing. And so what is their ultimate aim based on us, the readers? Why do they want to intrigue us? What's the point of that? Is it just coincidence that he happens to be writing about this book? Good, yes. To get people to read the book. They want the reader to buy the book. Good, good. So we keep reading, yes. It's a book review, so the aim is to get the readers to read the book. Fantastic, you guys know what you're doing. Excellent, excellent. So you want to read the rest of the book. Yes, brilliant. Okay, very nice, guys. Thank you. So, the article goes on with these little snippets of what's in the book, sort of in this indirect way. And then later on in the article, you'll see, it starts to mention somebody else, somebody new. Jennifer Niven, formerly a screenwriter, assembles her characters with all the skill of an experienced novelist. Is Jennifer Niven one of the explorers who went to explore the Arctic or the Antarctic? And just as a side point to what we've been saying before, the book reviewers are paid to write like this in this way. There could be. I'm not exactly sure if book reviewers are paid to do that. They need to have material that they've got to review. And in general, yeah, maybe they are. Maybe there's sponsorship or something. I'd have to research that. That's a good point. Is showing the writer and her style. Yes, that's right. Okay. So essentially, going on to Jennifer Niven, after talking about these explorers, is the journalist's way of introducing her, introducing the writer without being blatant about it, by drawing us in with intrigue. Okay, so instead of going, Jennifer Niven has written a book about Arctic explorers. We can see all the interesting things the explorers do in the book. No, he's enticed us, he's lured us in. And then only near the end does he even mention Jennifer Niven, very slightly, in quite a subtle way. Jennifer Niven, formerly a screenwriter, so she would write for the screen, for TV, for plays, for that kind of thing, assembles her characters. That's an interesting way of putting it. Are these people characters? I suppose they are historical characters, you could say. Okay, so just wording this very nicely. With all the skill of an experienced novelist. Good. So this is showing the writer and her style. Good. Both of the principles are carefully drawn. The principles, well, this is referring to the principal characters, okay? They are carefully drawn because we talk about drawing characters, okay? Creating them. There is Bartlett, an energetic, skillful mariner, sailor, big in every way with a booming voice and a love for literature and women. Okay, so she's obviously created quite an interesting take on Bartlett. This is her take on him, so we don't know if it's quite true or not, but this will probably be based on the research she's done about him. Stephenson, by contrast, comes across as an egotist of monstrous proportions, charming, silver-tongued, and handsome. Here is what we call a list of 3. Why do we use list of 3s, do you think? Type your answers there in the chat box, a list of 3. Why describe this character as charming, silver-tongued, and handsome? Why not just say handsome? He cared little for those under his command. Why should we use this list of 3? Charming, silver-tongued, and handsome. Let's see if you've got some answers there. So remember, when you list characteristics like this, you're trying to do something. To describe him better, make it more descriptive? Absolutely, yes, there is that. Giving a full explanation of his character is in the least verbose way. Good, yes, so we get, it tells us something more about his character without going into too much detail. Very nice, yes. Charming, silver-tongued, and handsome. So we can tell he's charming, so he knows how to, he's obviously good with other people. He's got good people skills, shall we say. Silver-tongued, might even be a bit of a con man. You know, everything he says sounds good. Okay, and handsome. So here's some other suggestions. Make us envision the character in a more detailed way. Excellent, yes. So this list of 3 is definitely telling us about this character. You'll see that writers in general employ this method, this technique, quite often, especially in newspaper articles and magazines. And the whole point is to emphasize something. And here we are emphasizing the character. Okay. So this is all to emphasize character. Sorry about the terrible handwriting. To emphasize character. So just keep a note of these kind of things that these type of texts do. They use these techniques and in order to try and entice you, to lure you in. So he cared little for those under his command. So now we get this insight into the different characters that this person has created in her book, okay, based on historical evidence. And then at the end of the article, it says, in all, 60 men were to die, but Bartlett emerged as the true hero of the hour. So we love stories about superheroes, and here's a human hero. This should make us want to read the book even more. Niven's account, once again, touching on the author, Niven's account, and here we have what's called parenthetical information. Okay, let me try and circle that a bit better. Parenthetical information. Why do you think this is called, and I'll write it out for you, parenthetical information? Why is it called parenthetical? Do you know what parentheses are? What is a parenthesis? And let's read it whilst you're thinking about your answers. Niven's account, always alive to the nuances of human strength as well as weakness, is at its strongest as she recounts his ghastly journey through the Arctic winter. Okay, it's extra information. Good, yes, it's extra information. So if you think about a parenthesis, a bracket, for example, brackets usually give you more information, right? My dog, Bruno, you could have in the bracket here. Okay, my dog Bruno likes bones, okay? That sentence, if you took out that parentheses, would still make sense. My dog likes bones. But parentheses allows you to give that extra bit of information. And we are trained to see that there's extra information being given because we know there's brackets. It could also work with these dashes. These are dashes, not hyphens. Hyphens connect words, dashes do not. So dashes, you could also even use commas. My dog comma, okay, my dog. Remember, the comma should always stay near the word, comma, Bruno, comma, likes bones, okay? So this is just an example and aside for you to remind you about parenthetical information and what it does. So I've got more extra information between two brackets, and that's nice, you've bracketed it, good. A parenthesis is a sentence that gives you more info. Yes, that's part of a sentence that gives you more info. Absolutely, good. Very nice. Okay, so you can see the kind of techniques this writer is using. This is obviously quite an experienced writer, being able to use punctuation for the sake of effect. I mean, even just looking at, I touched on the idea of a hyphen. Look at how he describes the terrible condition of this ship, the Quest. He called it another Antarctic no-hoper, okay? So obviously trying to suggest something and creating this concept of a no-hoper. We don't talk about no-hopers, do we? But this writer is clever enough to use punctuation to cause an effect. So keep these in mind when you have to write your own articles or whatever it is that you need to do in your direct writing. So let's continue. Niven's account, always alive to the nuances of human strength as well as weakness, is at its strongest as she recounts his ghastly journey through the Arctic winter in search of help, and his equally determined quest for his lost crewmen when he at last found sanctuary in Siberia. And then it continues on to finish. And we've had a comment here to say that no hoper almost sounds like the name of the ship, which makes it very effective. Yeah, you're right. Instead of calling it the Quest, it should actually have been called the No Hoper. But I doubt that any sailor would want to get on it then. But yes. Okay, brilliant. All right, so this is, and I'm sorry for all the digressions, but this is a newspaper article, but more specifically, it's a review. So what is interesting about this particular piece is that you are trying to collate you're trying to put together, trying to meld two different formats. It's a newspaper article, so there must be formality, it must be written in nice full sentences, proper grammar employed, etc. But it's a review, so it must take into account the book that it is reviewing. Okay, so quite an interesting example that they've given you there, not just a typical newspaper article. And then just another point there, it also gives you a lot of information. Yes, it's informative. This entire piece is informative. From these little suggestions of the kinds of boats that these crazy explorers would go on, to what kind of writer Niven is and how she creates her characters, and how we should really get around to reading this book ultimately, because it sounds very, very interesting. Okay, so lots of things going on there, and you can bet your bottom dollar that this writer not just write this in one evening. Okay, this kind of work takes a long time to craft. But when you're in your exam writing your newspaper article, you won't have as much time to craft things, which is why it's always a good idea to practice past papers often and to do the assignments, because it should get you in that method of writing in a certain way, and so that when you encounter a style that you have to write in, if you want to write a newspaper article, you know what it needs. It needs that headline, it needs some catchy information, it needs to be in paragraphs, all of these things. So that is why it is worthwhile knowing the style and practicing past papers. All right, so we touched on this before, this next section, when we looked at language and style, but I just want to remind you, okay, because the whole point of directed writing is that you must be very, very familiar with style. Okay? The style of a piece of writing is determined by its aim. So what is the purpose of the writing? We've explored that now with this article. The voice. What kind of character is the speaker or the persona, depending on the piece of writing you were given? Okay. Audience. What do we know about their age, their interests, and their expectations? If we look at this newspaper article, who do you think the audience is in this situation? If we take into account age, do you think it's written for toddlers? If we look at interests, who's interested in this? Okay, that's a difficult one, because you can't always, you don't always know what people's interests are, but your background will come a lot into this section, interests. And audience expectations. Their expectations in terms of you as a writer, as a journalist. What do they expect from you? So, any suggestions? Good, nice. Okay, I've got some suggestions coming in. People who are interested in history. Yes, definitely. Okay. So, people who are interested in history, is that going to be young children, do you think? And another suggestion, people who are interested in history, yes. It's for mature people. If we look at age, it's for mature people. Yes, good. Because, you know, let's say as a teenager, are you going to enjoy, and I'm generalizing because some teenagers will, but are you going to enjoy reading how Arctic explorers are a breed apart, inevitably drawn, it would seem, by tragedy and the poetry of a good end? Oh my goodness, you have to work out what's going on there. It's exhausting. So, yes, I think this would definitely be for a more mature audience, people interested in history. And you'll find, and I'm generalizing here, that as you get older, you become more and more interested in history because you understand that history shapes the world around you and gives you insight into how people think and their motivations, explains why politicians do what politicians do or how that affects you. All these kind of things are based in history, okay? So history is psychology of sort. All right, so age for mature people, maybe someone that wants to go to the Arctic. Okay, yes. So other explorers, other modern day explorers, or people who want to go on a cruise, because now it's like, you know, trendy to go on a cruise to the Arctic. And what kind of age group are people that go on cruises? Well, they're generally older, right? So mostly old people. Good. And oh, somebody loves history and would love this book. Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Yes, history is very important. And part of, if you enjoy reading, you should enjoy history, because history is actually a story, isn't it? It's his or her story. So yes, very good. I'm so glad to hear that. So coming back to this, sorry, we always digress, and I'm sorry about that. Do we know about their age, their interests, and expectations? Yes. And so knowing, okay, oh, we didn't touch on this one. Expectations, right? That's a difficult one. But I would say that all depends on the newspaper. And this particular newspaper, I think, is a Sunday Times Review. And Sunday Times is quite, it's a newspaper who are probably aimed at educated people or professional people earning an income. And so they would expect a certain level of writing. This is not a shock tactic story about Kim Kardashian and her sisters and what they decided to buy that weekend. No, no, no. This is more almost academic, more formal in a way. Okay, so we would expect that in the Sunday Times. We wouldn't want to see articles about Kim Kardashian and what she bought that weekend. Okay, so that is what is meant by audience. You have to keep that in mind when you're writing for an audience. Are you writing to your a headmaster? Are you writing to your local newspaper? Are you writing to your mother? All of that will change. Will change how you write. Will change what you are writing as well. Okay, so now what about vocabulary? All right, we're almost going to run out of time. So I'm sorry. How formal is the situation, relationship, or subject? Okay, so this is a formal situation, I would argue. Okay, because it is reaching out to the public, but in particular, professional-minded public, educated public. So it has to come across as more formal, even though it's playful. It is quite playful in the way that it's designed. I mean, it's quite an interesting opening, that sentence, Arctic explorers are a breed apart, inevitably drawn, it would seem, by tragedy and the poetry of a good end, okay? Whether that good ending actually happens or not, well, it doesn't look like it does for these poor explorers. But this is a very interesting way of describing something in a playful way, but it's still formal. You see the kind of language that is used, inevitably drawn, okay? They can't help themselves. This is a very formal way of saying can't help themselves, okay? So pay attention to that kind of style. And how formal is the situation? The relationship. So remember, this is a journalist imparting information to a broad range of readers, because not just older people read the Sunday Times, but mostly older professional people will, but there will be some that don't. But it's about that relationship of respect between the journalist and the readers, and what readers expect. Okay, so I would say he's definitely catering for that market. He is pandering to that market, if you want to put it that way. So they expect him to sound a certain way, and this is part of being formal and respectful. How formal is the situation, relationship, or subject? Well, this is a researched book. To write nonfiction, you have to do a lot of research, and it has to be approved by your peers, that is by other people in your field, by academics, by professionals, before you will be allowed to publish such a book. And so it's an obvious choice for a newspaper like the Sunday Times to review this type of text. Okay. So why do you need to know that? Because maybe when you are given a directed writing task, the passage you have to base your task on might be quite informal, but you'd have to report it in a very formal, respectful way. So you will be challenged on how you do that. You'll be challenged as to your knowledge of formal versus informal, which, remember, is just another way of saying register. When they talk about the appropriate register, all they're talking about is, are you going to be formal and sound highfalutin, or are you going to be informal and everything's going to be casual and relaxed and cool? Okay, so that's the difference. Now, we've got one more minute. Sorry. Tone. Is the emotion and mood appropriate? So here the tone is quite informative, even though it's playful, but it's appropriate for this newspaper article. Sentence structures, which we've touched on before. Should sentences be simple, compound, complex, or a mixture? And generally, there will be a mixture. Maybe if you're writing a letter to your brother or your sister, there would probably be a bit of more simple stuff. Like, oh, I can't stand being here. I wish I could come home. Just simple, short, more emotional. Whereas you'll find that a lot of compound and complex sentences tend to happen in newspaper articles, although there will occasionally be something short and sharp, just to kind of shock the reader or to draw attention to something. There is not a very nice example of that here, but there will be if you read the entire article. There is some simple sentence somewhere. These are all aspects to consider when you are asked to write or to comment on a piece of writing. Okay, everybody, I'm sorry we've come to the end of our lesson. Good, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad this helps you a lot. Thank you for the nice well wishes. Great, guys. I will see you next week. You're welcome. You're welcome, everybody. I hope you have a lovely day too. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Cheers.